What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the ASTROLABE. I am your host, Matthew Erickson, and I am here, sent as an emissary from King Pilled, to bring you the good news. The good news is we have another ASTROLABE. Let's see. Hold on. I'm trying to grab a little something extra here that I wanted to include right off the top. There we go. Got the tab. How you guys doing? What's going on? It is Friday evening, and we're in the house. We got a big thunderstorm potentially rolling in. We've got a weekend. We're on the cusp of the weekend. It is right here, ready to embrace us. Are you ready to embrace it? Pete is in the house. I'm assuming this is there he is. Mr. Pete Quinones in the chat. For a second there, I'd said something about the thunderstorm, and I thought I saw my wife say Pete's here and thought that she was referring to our dog because our dog does not like it when the thunderstorms come. He's not going to be around a whole lot longer, but I'll probably have to run down after the show and get his thunder jacket on. Thank you guys for all the animals and all the emotes in the chat. That'll make Eastwood very happy. All righty. Well, let's see. What do we got here today? Scott Bessent was on Tucker. Man, not including, obviously, the president and the vice president. Scott Bessent is easily my favorite member of the administration. His conversation with Tucker was just legendary. And I've got several clips from that to share with you guys today. We'll talk about Trump waging war against leftist patronage systems and our patronage networks. I got a little blog post here from Martin Armstrong about Trump's tariffs. Got some other good economic news, some more retards on Twitter complaining about tariffs and getting epically dunked on by our guys. And then Wade Stotts. Wade Stotts is coming up. He went on Fox News on Will Cain's show and committed a murder. So we got to hype our boys. We'll play that, and then I got some good threads. Long posts from one of the best long posters, Devin Erickson. So, you guys ready to go? Strap on in. Let's get the lip pillow. Get the lip pillow ready. We're going to start off with a little bit of combining some of our favorite things here at the ASTROLABE. AI video content and racism. So let's go. This one's from Stone Tossers on Twitter.
In these anti-racism classes, my ass will attempt to penetrate your ass's mind.
Thank God you said mind.
Should my ass find any memories that reveals your ass to be a racist, we'll be sending your ass to Azkaban prison, you feel me? Now, any questions your ass want to ask?
I do have one, actually. How is it that you can evidently pronounce arse correctly, but you're incapable of pronouncing arsk, which is basically the same word, but with a cuss sound at the end?
Another word that ends in cuz, motherfucker, protego your ass.
Time to set up my 4chan account. I wonder if it still counts as racist if no one's around to hear me say it. Wow, and these don't even list the per capita numbers.
Stop it. Shit, Paula. Next time I'm gonna see your ass combing your hair and growing yourself a yee-yee-ass mustache.
We've been at it for 10 seconds. If I could just rest.
Racism don't rest, Potter, so we can't neither. Now sit your ass down. Potato. I'll have 2 number 9s, a number 9 large. Now that is some tasty fried chicken. Hey, cuz, this time, would it be possible to get the fried chicken put inside of the watermelon?
Sir, that's the 4th time you've asked us that today. I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises.
With that shit.
I'm sorry, sir. I...
Get your ass out of here, boy. And then he called me the N-word and he left.
I'm terribly sorry, Severus. That sounds like quite the ordeal.
Damn straight. I'ma need some reparations over this shit.
Perhaps we can order some fast food to help ameliorate the situation.
Ameliorate? I never heard of that spell.
I simply mean to cheer you up.
Ah, I see.
Some burgers, perhaps? Some pizza?
Pizza? Why can't a nigga you take me for? Expecto Patronage!
Chicken. After all this time.
Always, motherfucker.
Oh man, I might have to send that one over to the cyberbully. Video is actually by Dr. Foxotic, Phoxotic, YouTuber that now tweets. We've got racist YouTubers making AI mixes of, and we're slandering the sacred documents of the libs, taking their racially sensitive Harry Potter and making it racially sensitive another way. Vulpes Persona said, "Use the Fent wand, Harry." Junk Sock says, "Now I believe in AI." Yeah. Speaking of shitlib, core shitlib art pieces and racism, our boy Paul Suda has hit the stratosphere. Look at this, 7 million impressions. Look at our boy. Look at him growing up right in front of us. Maybe we'll be able to sidle on up to the Paul Suda celebrity and whittle off a few listeners for the ASTROLABE. So, Culture Crave says Disney has paused development on the live-action Tangled remake. This comes after Snow White flopped at the box office. And Paul Suda had the same thought I think all of us did. Oh, she was going to be black as hell. The replies have been next level. More AI meets racism. Disney's nappy. Oh my God. There was a couple other good ones here too. Let me see if I can find them. Oh, here you go. Paul says Project 2025 will purchase Disney and immediately begin production on a new "The Villain is Actually the Good Guy" live action feature. This is what I'm talking about. Can we get a let's see, an Our Guys owned and operated AI film studio to produce a series? Make it like a mini film series or something like that of "The Villain is Actually the Good Guy." Here we've got Gaston. Stay out of my town, furries. Oh, man. Give her a strange colored wig. Dreadlocks would be legitimately easier to climb. There was one particular one, but it shows up first. Oh, here it is. Charlemagne. Rapunzeliqua, let down your weave. And Paul says, I finna climb that motherfucker. Look at our boys out here. We're going to talk more about our guys' capacity for propaganda and art later on in the back end of the show today. So we'll bookend it with with right-wing online racism. Eric Doherty here has given us an update from our fearless leader. Trump is signing an executive order keeping TikTok up for another 75 days while a deal is hammered out. And the man himself, Mr. 47, our president, he says, my administration has been working very hard on a deal to save TikTok, and we have made tremendous progress. The deal requires more work to ensure all necessary approvals are signed, which is why I'm signing an executive order to keep TikTok up and running for an additional 75 days. I'm pretty sure the last one, it did something similar for 30 days, I believe. So now an additional 75 days. So that takes us out to, what would that be? It's going to be about 2.5 months, and we're at the beginning of February, so middle of June. That's a kind of interesting timing. We hope to continue working in good faith with China, who I understand are not very happy about our reciprocal tariffs, necessary for fair and balanced trade between China and the USA. This proves that tariffs are the most powerful economic tool and very important to our national security. We do not want TikTok to go dark. We look forward to working with TikTok and China to close the deal. And then my favorite thing, one of my favorite things that he ever tweets is, thank you for your attention to this matter. Our beloved boomer. The reason I wanted to include this here today is because, number one, China and reciprocal tariffs. So this is the TikTok deal is bound up in the whole tariffs negotiation thing. And he's talked about how basically they would be happy to facilitate a purchase, however you want to put it, basically making it no longer a Chinese company and making it an American company. And in return, they want to put a little bit of that into the sovereign wealth fund, which might become a proof of concept for part of the economic model going forward. So this would be an interesting one to keep track of. Simply for, I know TikTok is probably much less popular among the audience of the Astrolabe than it is among the general population. But it's extremely popular with the general population. And Trump definitely doesn't need the bad publicity. Like him doing something that causes TikTok to no longer be available to Americans could legitimately hurt him and hurt Republicans in the midterms. So trying to keep TikTok up and running is actually probably a legitimate electoral priority. And then there's some interesting economic stuff implied there as well, because if TikTok was to be sold to an American company and become an American company, and the government would have a sovereign wealth fund with a stake in it, it would become even more valuable than it already is. Its value is somewhat suppressed by the connection with China and its hazy legal status. So if TikTok actually becomes an American company, and even further, if the sovereign wealth fund takes a small stake in it, then it's going to become extremely valuable. And I think that there's potentially a very good opportunity here for our guys to take over yet another social media platform and completely drown it with all of our propaganda. So be prepared, video makers out there, our artistic fellows. Be prepared to move over to TikTok and begin to colonize it with our propaganda. Update on one of the Supreme Court cases here. Oops. Let's see, get the right tab. Here we go. Again, from Eric Doherty, says the Supreme Court just sided with Trump 5-4, allowing him to freeze tens of millions in DEI education grants. And someone here asked Grok. Grok said the case is likely National Urban League v. Trump, filed February 19, 2025 in D.C. District Court. It challenges Trump's anti-DEI executive orders, including freezing $65 million in teacher training grants. On April 4, 2025, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 to allow the freeze, overturning a lower court. So we've got the Supreme Court now stepping in, and as we are keeping track of the score here, this would be Trump 1, Libs 0, unless there's another case that the Supreme Court has already weighed in on that I can't remember right now. I think this is one of the first major ones where the Supreme Court has weighed in. They ruled 5-4, and Amy Coney Barrett voted with the majority, interestingly enough. So I'm guessing the 4 must be, let's see. So that would be Amy Coney, or sorry, Jumanji. I can never remember her name. I just call her Jumanji. Jumanji, Sotomayor, Kagan, and then so that must have been either Roberts, or I suppose I could go find out. Let's just ask. Let's ask Grok. It's not going to take me directly to it. Hold on. Let me copy this and see who voted where. Which, all caps, SCOTUS justices voted for and against this. Breakdown. Okay, it says likely breakdown. Okay, yeah, so Robert, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jumanji. And that's probably how I would expect it to be, knowing that Amy Coney Barrett voted with the majority. So yeah, definitely shouldn't be anywhere near that close. I didn't have time to dig into it and see what the exact details of it are. But frankly, a court like or a case like this, there shouldn't even be nuance to it. There's no nuance. No on DEI. No on $65 million worth of teacher training grants. No, just no on all of it. Needs to be the entire concept needs to be completely dismissed out of hand. Jumanji McSealing chirper. Taylor. Okay, so for leftist patronage networks, we got a little something on this. Andy No tweets, a radical Portland leftist named Davis Lauren Nafshon was arrested on March 29 after allegedly trying to blind staff working inside a Portland Tesla showroom using a powerful green laser. So, a Tesla showroom in Portland. So you have people who live in Portland, who have gone out of their way, chosen to live in Portland, and they're working at a Tesla dealership. And this guy says, all right, we're going to go blind the people who live at a Portland, who live in Portland and work at the Tesla dealership. Very, very likely not to be Trump voters or people anywhere inclined toward Trump voting. Now, there are definitely plenty of Trump-inclined people in Oregon, but Portland is one of the worst cities in the country in terms of the composition of people who make up the demographics there. The laser, which Antifa also used in 2020 at the riots to injure the eyes of officers protecting the courthouse, can cause blindness. He's 27. He was charged with felony unlawful use of a laser, unlawful directing of a laser, and menacing. He was quickly released without bail the same day. He works at the taxpayer-funded homeless support nonprofit Do Good Multnomah. He works at a place called Do Good Multnomah. He is a twink just wandering through life, dead and fishhead, and thought that it was a good idea to go try to blind Portland shitlibs working at Tesla with a laser. At least it was green, I suppose. Eric Schmidt says, and surprise, he was working at a taxpayer-funded NGO. In 2023, his employer received over $16.3 million in government grants, including more than $3 million in federal tax dollars. Your tax money is funding a permanent class of left-wing extremists. This is a classic example of the government directly funding a terrorist in the United States. This guy's very existence is an act of terrorism. And Jared Stettman here says that's right, and the Trump administration is finally going after these patronage networks, as I wrote for Daily Signal. The spoils system still exists. It's just been permanently sealed in place and works only for the Democrat Party. So let's give this a read. This is from the Daily Signal, written by Jarrett Stettman from March 30, 2025. How Trump is decimating the left's patronage networks. Just a couple of guys hanging out and having a grand old time together. President Donald Trump has launched a political counter-revolution in the early days of his second presidency. One of the most profound ways he's doing this is by effectively cutting off the left's massive government-funded patronage networks. What's making Trump's move so effective is that many of these networks are based on government functions that long ago either waned in usefulness or have completely abandoned their purpose. EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin appeared on One American News Wednesday and explained how the left has insidiously transformed the federal government into a Democratic Party funding apparatus. Zeldin explained how the EPA under the Biden administration was used as a slush fund to give money to activists. The EPA was absolutely being used to push out this green slush fund to their friends, Zeldin said. By design, the director of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund leaves one of these NGOs, goes to work for the Biden administration to design this whole setup, and then sees his former employer get $5 billion. That's a great gig if you can have it, man. Go work for an NGO, then go work for the government, design a spoils system for yourself, and then make sure your former employer gets $5 billion. Zeldin said that this scheme applied to contracts large and small, to both green, non-governmental organization executives and to low-level activists. The EPA has been acting as a conduit to transfer huge amounts of taxpayer money to the left's base. Are we providing clean air, land, and water? Zeldin asked rhetorically. This wasn't money spent toward remediating environmental issues. This was money going through their friends. Think about how much $5 billion could have accomplished. If the government is going to spend $5 billion on shit like this, think about how much could be accomplished by dedicating that $5 billion toward, I don't know, infrastructure, beautification projects, I was going to say public transportation, but no, actually, you'd want to disincentivize public transportation. What about grants for first-time homeowners, or subsidies for like tax subsidies for new parents. If the government's going to spend this stuff, then it should be spent on good things that benefit our people. And frankly, if the government spent this on those sorts of things, like remodeling, beautifying cities, upkeep of public parks, making public parks actually nice and pleasant to be in, subsidizing first-time homeowners or young parents. If the government actually did spend that money on those things, you would get a payoff from it. Even though the libertarians want to scream and cry and say you wouldn't. Indeed, it was going through their friends. Zeldin has canceled hundreds of contracts worth $1.5 billion that were tabbed to go to essentially left-wing activist networks focused on environmental justice. Democrats are apoplectic about the move, of course. Big surprise. Zeldin is going ham on other climate change initiatives, too, where big money is at stake for the left's Green Client Network. This is only the tip of the iceberg. One of the real misunderstandings about the modern administrative state demolished in recent years is that it's operated by nonpartisan experts. Nearly a century and a half after civil service reform was supposed to eliminate the spoils system, we have a vast federal leviathan that has not only failed to eliminate partisan administration, it has spread its corruption to an almost unimaginable scale. You're never gonna get rid of partisan administration because only partisan administration could eliminate partisan administration. So what you need is nakedly partisan administration directed toward the people of the country, heritage Americans, the people who belong here, directed toward actually encouraging and subsidizing and funding positive behavior. If you have a government, especially the types of governments that exist nowadays, those governments are going to be gigantic social engineering factories. So the goal is not to make them stop social engineering. The point is to make them social engineer good things. Since at least Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, this modern spoils system has been used to the benefit of one party, the Democrats, who run the system no matter who is in the White House. In his second term, Trump is waging political war on that network. It's not just the EPA. Department by department, Trump's secretaries, assisted by Elon Musk's Doge, are severing the ties that bind this vast, corrupt octopus. That's what freezing USAID funding was partly about. Foreign aid is already deeply unpopular with the American people, but what we are spending money on is not just generic aid to potential international partners. Like many of the federal government's projects, USAID is in many ways a relic of a bygone era, when the U.S. aimed to stop the influence of communism around the globe. Sometime after the fall of the USSR, it became a vehicle to fund various leftist projects around the globe, with little relation to U.S. national interest. In fact, many of these projects were downright loathed in countries that weren't too pleased with the U.S. government funding pride parades in their capital city. The Trump administration is pulling the plug on the unofficially established church of the left, too. They're withdrawing, or threatening to withdraw, hundreds of millions of dollars in grant money directed at colleges and universities that fail to protect their students from anti-Semitism on campus. And to all the guys who want to spaz out about anti-Semitism, why are they doing that? Can you think of a more rock-solid way to ensure that these colleges and universities get their funding stripped? It's the most politically insulated mechanism imaginable. If you had actual operators in government who knew how to, they knew how to realpolitik, then perhaps the single best way to attack the college and university systems is on the basis of them being hives of anti-Semitism. Because it's such an untouchable political issue, nobody could possibly dare to stand against them on it. It's sure to get the full support that's necessary. Again, much as some of our guys may not want to believe it, we do live in a world where you have to consider these sorts of things. They're threatening schools with removing even more funds if they continue their illegally racially discriminatory DEI programs too. And one might add that the problem goes far beyond anti-Semitism and DEI. American universities, which have in many cases become hedge funds with schools attached, very good description, are increasingly failing to serve the public good. And you might even question whether those are even schools that are attached to them anymore. It's just like a hedge fund with something pretending to be a school. Much of what they call vital research is bogus. In addition, there's no question that taxpayer-funded research grants allow universities to fund their obnoxious humanities departments that are politically monolithic at nearly every school. They are in the business of gatekeeping the American elite and turning out generations of activists who not only run the show on campus, but populate newsrooms, corporate boardrooms, and government institutions. Want to know what nearly everyone who runs an elite institution Want to know why nearly everyone who runs an elite institution sounds the same, spouts the same dogmas, and went along with every insanity of the 2020 Great Awakening? There's your source. Against this vast machine, the regime is underwritten by the taxpayer. Trump is breaking up that system. He's targeting its power at the source. To complete Trump's revolution, Congress is going to have to get involved at some point. For instance, National Public Radio's taxpayer-funded scam to fund left-wing journalists was completely exposed by the disastrous testimony of its CEO at a House hearing on Wednesday. There's no excuse for keeping the money flowing to a blatantly partisan news network that lost its public function long ago. What this whole thing illustrates is that the now collapsing regime attained power and then set upon the goal of using every single resource at their disposal to cultivate an assembly line of people who thought like them and valued things like them and were dedicated to preserving the institutions that they were putting into place, preserving and maximizing them. There's a lesson to be learned here. This is how a proper regime functions. If we are to be rid of that regime ever, it's going to require a new regime, a right-wing Christian nationalist regime that creates all of the exact same patronage networks, except for wholesome, good, and virtuous things. And we can't be afraid to talk about it like this. The problem with these patronage networks wasn't that they existed. The problem with these patronage networks is that they were corrupt networks established by evil people that were being used to cultivate the worst things in the world. They were being used to openly fund crime and subversion. That was the problem with them. It wasn't that there was a patronage network system established and maintained and promoted and cultivated by the ruling class. There will continue to be one. The question will be, there'll be two questions about it. One, how effective will it be? That'll determine how long that ruling class will last. And what things does it promote? What are the principles, the values that it's built around? Musk had it right when he called NPR a taxpayer-funded arm of the DNC. Let's make NPR a taxpayer-funded arm of MAGA. This is why the left's institutions are often so powerful. They're often grafted onto a money spigot coming from the federal government. The right is used to operating without that kind of support and has found ways to thrive without it. Thrive is pushing it, but we're getting there. How will the left function without their massive financial cushion? For now, probably not too well. What the Trump administration has accomplished already is remarkable. They've disrupted the left's government funding racket in ways no president has before. Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts has called this a second American revolution, and in many ways, it is. Self-government is being restored, the left's spoils system is being defunded, and there is now hope that a downsized and more efficient federal government can begin again to serve the American people, all the people, rather than bilking them. I don't really keep up with the Daily Signal, and it just kind of mixes in with all the other, what is there, Daily Caller and Daily Wire and Daily whatevers. That wasn't too bad. I didn't expect that was more than I expected. Taylor Brown says anti-whiteism doesn't make headlines like anti-Semitism does. Right. And they are going after colleges for anti-whiteism as well, because they're defunding them for DEI. Now, they may say that this is because this is race blind, and they probably believe this is because of race blindness, and we need, more Asians and whatever else. But our goal, our initial goal has to be the elimination of the enemy's strongholds. Destroy them on whatever basis is necessary. What replaces them is up to us. But we need someone else to go actually destroy them for us. And so if you want to defund the colleges and the universities on the basis of they're too mean to Jews and they don't enroll enough Asians, sure, whatever. Just defund them. That's all I care about. Martin Armstrong says Trump's tariffs are winning. This is posted today. He says, I've said on various podcasts that a 10% tariff is really a tariff. Beyond that, it is political to force free trade. So up to 10% of up to a 10% tariff is just a tariff, the way we commonly think of it. When you go beyond 10%, it's now a political tool being used to force free trade. Most countries are dropping tariffs on U.S. goods, creating what Trump actually was trying to create, free trade. The belligerent one, of course, is France. Macron has a Napoleon complex, which is why he's been pushing for war, offering nukes to Germany, and trying to supplant the United States as the savior of Europe, being the third largest nuclear power. The tariffs give us great power to negotiate. They always have, Trump told reporters Thursday aboard Air Force One, a day after his Rose Garden Liberation Day tariff announcement sunk the market to its lowest point since the COVID-19 pandemic. I've received many inquiries about the U.S. reciprocal tariffs announced on April 2. The justification for these tariffs can be found in President Trump's executive order, which may be found here. I'm not an expert in tariff law. Nonetheless, parts of the executive order are open to interpretation by experts, and the end result remains fluid from one day to the next right now. Therefore, it is important to consult with a customs broker before importing or exporting to the U.S. It's always a matter of interpretation. Macron is belligerent, and like Carney in Canada and Democrats in the USA, whatever Trump does, he must do the opposite. Macron, according to sources, and Martin Armstrong has sources, is urging full retaliation against Trump that the EU should block all U.S. goods and push for capital controls to prevent money from flowing to the U.S. He already uses non-tariffs, pretending it to be quality control, outright blocking some products. However, Macron is also pushing for war with Russia, offering Germany nukes to replace the U.S. as the savior of Europe. He thinks war will elevate France to the leadership of Europe because of its nukes. Macron has always had a problem with sparkling wines in California being labeled champagne. The French reinterpreted the label champagne to be the origin rather than how it's produced. Champagne made in France is produced using the méthode champenoise. Weird language. If that bottle is produced using the exact same method anywhere else, it must carry a different name. But that was part of the treaty after World War II, and it was meant to punish Germany. But the U.S. never ratified that treaty, so it never applied to the United States. It's got a picture of the treaty here. Or no, a picture of a for sale of champagne from the Ottawa Daily Citizen in Canada. Sparkling wines have been produced in California since about 1860, and they were introduced by European immigrants, including those from France. Since then, the term champagne has been used to refer to the type of wine, not where it was made. Here's an advertisement from 1866 offering North American-produced champagne. Macron does not care how it is made. He wants to redefine the word champagne to mean France as the area where it is produced rather than the type. This is just an example of dealing with the EU. First, keep in mind that these tariffs, broad as they are being levied under the president's emergency powers. This means that the usual statutory exemptions for antiques and other collectibles, which are referenced in the HTS codes, may not seem to apply depending on who does the interpretation. Does this executive order overrule the statutory exemptions covering antiquities, when in fact the purpose of the tariffs focuses on currently manufactured goods, not antiquities of more than 100 years old? While executive orders are powerful tools for president action, they cannot override statutes. In cases of conflict, statutes prevail unless the executive order operates within constitutional or delegated authority. Courts serve as the ultimate arbiter, ensuring adherence to the separation of powers. So what does it mean for antiquities? According to Section 2 of the executive order, the additional ad valorem duty on all imports from all trading partners shall start at 10%, and shortly thereafter, the additional ad valorem duty shall increase for trading partners enumerated in Annex 1 to this order at the rate set forth in Annex 1 to this order. These additional ad valorem duties shall apply until I determine that the underlying conditions described above are satisfied, resolved, or mitigated. However, since an executive order cannot act unconstitutionally, it should not be interpreted as overruling a valid statute defining the exemption. Moreover, according to Section 3, quoting, except as otherwise provided in this order, all articles imported into the customs territory of the United States shall be, consistent with law, subject to an additional ad valorem rate of duty of 10%. Such rates of duty shall apply with respect to goods entered for consumption or withdrawn from warehouse for consumption on or after 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on April 5, 2025, except that goods loaded onto a vessel at the port of loading and in transit on the final mode of transit before 12:01 on the same time and entered for consumption or withdrawn from warehouse for consumption after the same time shall not be subject to such additional duty. Isn't it? It's like someone had to sit down and delineate all of this, run through each of these individual points to produce this. Furthermore, except as otherwise provided in this order, at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on April 9, all articles from trading partners enumerated in Annex 1 to this order imported into the customs territory of the United States shall be, consistent with law, subject to the country-specific ad valorem rates of duty specified in Annex 1 to this order. Such rates of duty shall apply with respect to goods entered for consumption or withdrawn from warehouse for consumption at the same time, except that goods loaded onto a vessel at the port of loading and in transit on the final mode of transit before the same time, and enter for consumption, yada, 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 shall not be subject to these country-specific ad valorem rates set forth in this order. Therefore, under Section 3BV of the Executive Order, it is suggested that things like antiquities should be exempt under the Executive Order because they are generally exempt from tariffs under the Harmonized Tariff Schedule. Furthermore, there's a statutory exemption for informational materials under 15 U.S.C. 1702B. While this certainly applies to artwork and our reports, informational materials are exempt. Additionally, I should note that for the time being, at least, there is a separate exemption for low-value shipments under $800, which an executive order cannot nullify. So it's very interesting here that informational materials are exempt, but I hadn't even considered the possibility of things like informational materials being not exempt and selling informational materials or digital services online themselves having a tariff applied to them. Continuing forth, this guy here, who it's hard to believe this is a real person. He's had a couple of tweets in the last few days that just really, really stretch the imagination. Russ Latino, Christian, husband, dad, founder and CEO of Magnolia Tribune, host of The Sit Down, recovering lawyer, believer in people. Apparently from Mississippi. Magnolia Tribune is, it looks like a legitimate publication here. Trump extends TikTok deadline. Lawmakers agree to outlaw camping on public property. Mississippi explores one-door policy. It looks like a ordinary article with legitimate people in it. So I think this is a real dude. It reads like this tweet I'm about to read here reads like a parody, but nope, he's a real dude. He says, I just got off the phone with a business owner in Mississippi. He's pumped millions into a business distributing a product he imports from China. His contract with the company prevents him from manufacturing it in the U.S. He also has contracts with a number of large retailers, Walmart, Walgreens, etc. He described some of those contracts as inflexible, requiring him to sell a unit at a set price. He told me he anticipates paying over $1 million in tariffs next week as the 54% tariff kicks in, and has no ability to simply upcharge his retail customers to cover the expense. In his words, Russ, I don't have 54% profit. This is me put out of business stuff. I share this because there are probably tens of thousands of businesses in similar situations. I just happen to have one reach out to me. Well, thank you, Russ. Thank you for sharing that. As Lee points out, funny how business owner in Mississippi actually means Chinese distribution center operating out of Mississippi. Note that he has this business. He imports products from China. So he's bringing production from China and paying China for it. And then marking it up and charging Americans for it. And he has contracts that are inflexible, requiring him to sell a unit at a set price. And his contract prevents him from manufacturing it in the U.S. This is a very good deal for China. This guy, it's good if he goes out of business. I hope he goes out of business. This is precisely, exactly what the tariffs are designed to discourage, eliminate, reverse. Thank you, Hermetic Hegemony, gifting a membership to Zhang Wei 3.0. Welcome, Zhang Wei 3.0. You are now a member of the King Pilled. Another lol cow. Peter Schiff. His motivations with all of this kvetching are so transparent. He is he's being personally discredited in having his wealth, the aspects of his wealth that are frankly ill-gotten being removed from him, and so he's very angry. He cares much more about himself than he does about the state of the country and his countrymen. He says, Nike won't build factories in the U.S. to make sneakers. That would add more cost than the 40% tariffs. Plus, they need to stay competitive selling to customers in other countries that don't impose tariffs. The result will be fewer sneakers sold in the U.S. at much higher prices. Ah, the Foot Locker Americans! And Josiah Lippincott digitally ends his life. He says, yeah, I hope Nike's stock goes to zero. Phil Knight is a traitor to his country who enriched himself at the expense of his fellow citizens. If I saw him on fire, I wouldn't piss to put him out. Knight's big innovation in shoe manufacturing was figuring out how to be one of the first people to flood the American market with cheaply made plastic footwear from Asia. Knight didn't make better, more durable shoes. He made cheaper ones by blowing up the Native American industry. Access to slave labor is, in the short run, a competitive advantage over skilled free labor. There's the war between the states distilled to a single sentence. In 1990, 10 years after the Nike IPO, there were 85,000 Americans employed making shoes. Today, there are only 10,000, and 99% of our shoes are made overseas. The only exception is footwear for the military. So 35 years ago, there were 85,000 Americans employed making shoes. Today, there are only 10,000. Are our shoes better? I don't know. We got more choice of shitty stuff. Shoes suck. They don't last. Everyone's like, it's all fashionable now to go get the like boutique niche ones that are zero drop or whatever. All this research that's been done proving just how, you don't even need the research. You could just look just how destructive to the human foot the types of shoes that in particular Nike produces are. So this guy basically single-handedly eliminated an entire industry and screwed over the rest of the country by making creating this negative set of incentives here, where we have to pay another country to get a shitty product that puts our people out of business, but it makes Phil Knight real wealthy. Phil Knight, however, is worth $35 billion, and Nike has a market cap of $90 billion. In other words, the good middle-class wages once generated by homegrown American shoe manufacturing have been transformed by outsourcing into equities owned by a small class of investors and one insanely wealthy oligarch. Global free trade is a way for the powerful to screw over the middle class by forcing them to compete with third-world slave labor. Yes, with high tariffs, Americans would have to pay slightly more for shoes. In return, however, they would be subsidizing good-paying jobs in a decentralized industrial base in their own communities. You paying attention, libertarians? Paying slightly more for shoes that are made in America is good. It is good if Americans are forced into this situation. Global free trade, on the other hand, subsidizes massive increases in asset valuation. If you're one of the first in on the ground floor, then you can make insane amounts of money by blowing up middle-class wages by outsourcing those jobs overseas. Libertarians and Wall Street types love to call this capitalism and the free market at work. But in reality, they are defrauding their countrymen out of the opportunity to build products themselves. Americans are no longer able to make shoes at home. That option's not available to you. How can we call this a free market when it constrains our choices? Outsourcing is 100% a government subsidy. It is a privilege allowed by the state to a select few citizens who figure out how to manipulate the international market to their advantage. Phil Knight discovered the much cheaper Asian shoe market in the early 1960s because he had the money to travel abroad. His middle-class neighbors making an honest living making shoes did not have that opportunity. And here's a graph with the declining U.S. employment in footwear manufacturing. And you might say, well, footwear is not that important. It's not like it's, antibiotics or semiconductors or a whole bunch of other military equipment. No, it's nothing important. It's just shoes. Yeah, got all the others as well. All those other things I just listed. So here is this wonderful, decent man. You know he's a decent man because he's gay and he knows that it's not proper to talk about it in public. He avoids talking about it as much as possible. When someone else brings it up, he refers to his spouse. He's not going to come rub it in your face. There's people who are still just now realizing that Scott Bessent is gay because he doesn't push it in your face. There's been gay men who are in positions of power who are prominent and famous for a very, very long time. Many, many historical figures that are not known as gay because they didn't make it their entire identity and personality. That's part of how you know this is a man with class. He's also like a 9th generation American and a huge history buff. And this interview that he did with Tucker Carlson may be the best one he's done yet. The All In podcast one was good, but this one, you can tell he's really beginning to refine his messaging, and he's getting more and more enthusiastic and passionate about it. And he's not exactly a enthusiastic, passionate person. So I got a handful of clips here. Let's launch into them. This first one here, talking about the tariffs, the reason for the tariffs.
And this is the first step towards realigning that. A lot of our trading partners, including some of our allies, have not been good partners. If tariffs are so bad, why do they have them? Why do they have them? Right? Or if the American consumer is going to pay all the tariff, then why do they care about tariffs?
Right.
Because they're going to eat them. So, I think that this is the beginning of a process. We're going to reindustrialize, that we have gone to a highly financialized economy. We have stopped making things, especially a lot of things that are relevant for national security. I think one of the few good outcomes from COVID was we had a beta test for what maybe a kinetic war with a large adversary could look like. And it turned out that these highly efficient supply chains were not strategically secure. So that we don't make our own medicines, that we don't make our own semiconductors, that we don't make our own ships anymore. So I think if I were to say, like, was there any good outcome from COVID? It woke the world up to these supply chain problems. So economic security is national security. President Trump and I have talked about that a lot. So this is a national security issue that we're seeing here, but it's also an economic security issue. And it's to, I don't want to say redistribute, but it is to give working Americans real wage gains and enhance their lives. And I've said out of the campaign trail, one of my most frequent mottos was, Wall Street's done great. It can continue doing well, but it's Main Street's turn. It's Main Street's turn. And that's what we saw yesterday. It's Main Street's turn.
It's interesting that he says out on the campaign trail. He talks about this when he was on the campaign trail, because he was a Treasury Secretary. So he was nominated for his position. So at some point, he sees himself as having been on the campaign trail. And I don't know if he's referring to the series of interviews that he did last year prior to the election, before anybody knew that he was actually going to be Treasury Secretary, or if he's referring to like the interviews and stuff he started doing between the election and the inauguration. It's interesting that he refers to the campaign trail. And I think it speaks to, there's a report out today that he's like regretting being there and he's looking for a way out, which is one of the most preposterous things. If you just listen to this interview, this dude is clearly not going anywhere. He went and he pitched himself to Trump. He wanted to be there. Everything that's happening right now, this is his baby. This is his legacy that he is creating. He's not going anywhere. You could not pry him out of his role in the administration right now. And also, it was funny. He said redistribute. He's like, I don't want to say redistribute, obviously, because that has some commie implications. But I'll say it for him. Yes, we need a redistribution. That's what's happening right now. The stock market is burning off the fake growth that we got over the last, I don't know, year. Oh no, we're going back to how things were a year ago. The only reason the stock market was where it was because of money that was put in places where it shouldn't have been put. Whether through corruption or fraud or bad incentives. Or a combination of all of the above. And that money, all of these asset bubbles that have been created by this relentless government spending, that money needs to be redistributed away from the people who hold those overvalued assets. They need to take a haircut, and that money needs to be redistributed to the people who have been defrauded of it by the behavior of the previous administration and going back for decades. Yes, redistribution. We need redistribution. We're getting redistribution. And it's good. I've seen plenty of people who are good people who have been benefiting from these asset bubbles, and they're like, hey, I'm taking it on the chin, and I recognize this is what's good for the country, and that's cool by me. I think Tim Kennedy was one of them. There are good people who are taking a haircut here as well. But we got to be serious about this. It is good, even for those people, even for the good people who are taking a haircut. It's a good thing. The good ones recognize it. All the people who are crying about it, it's like what they said when they were talking about fraud. And Elon said when he was at PayPal, the people who screamed the loudest were the fraudulent ones. So the people who are all screaming about the wealth that they're losing, they're indicating to you that they don't think that they earned that wealth properly. They may not realize it consciously, but subconsciously, they recognize that it was ill-gotten wealth that they were hoping they could keep, and now they're realizing they're not going to. Taylor says the stock market has been fake and gay for a while, since at least the beginning of the quantitative easing that began under Obama. Probably a lot longer than that, though. Yeah, I mean, it's the notion that the stock market would become this like central feature of the economy that everything would revolve around is silly. The stock market is just like one measure of a certain aspect of the economy. It's easy to game, and having it fully integrated into the rest of the economy like it has become is actually a suicide pact. It's not gonna, it would not be able to continue always and forever up, which is kind of a silly prospect to begin with. Like we're just going to infinitely go up forever and ever and ever. It doesn't really make sense, but we've lived in a silly world for a long time. This clip right here, I'm so glad somebody clipped this, because when I was listening to it, I was getting goosebumps. And I was going to go clip it if somebody else didn't. So shout out to Wall Street Apes for clipping this here. Notice how you may not pick it up quite as much just getting kind of the brief clips here. So I'd encourage you to just go listen to the whole interview. But for Scott Bessent, comparatively speaking, you could see he was getting passionate in this section.
The distribution of equities across households, the top 10% of Americans own 88% of equities. 88% of the stock market. The next 40% owns 12% of the stock market. The bottom 50 has debt. They have credit card bills. They rent their homes. They have auto loans. And we've got to give them some relief. That I was struck by the statistic from last year.
That's the message right there. Just as a bystander, I'm like, wow, okay.
All right. Or
I'm going to play that one more time.
They have credit card bills. Okay. The next 40% owns 12% of the stock market. The bottom 50 has debt. They have
The bottom 50 owns none of the stock market. 100% of the stock market is owned by the top 50% in the country. The bottom 50% own zero equities. They own debt.
credit card bills, they rent their homes, they have auto loans, and we've got to give them some relief. That I was struck by the statistic from last year.
That's the message right there. Just as a bystander, I'm like, wow, okay.
All right, or that I like the examples, and I was really struck by two different statistics last year. Summer of 2024, Americans took more European vacations than they had in history. Summer of 2024, more Americans were using food banks than they ever have in history. I went into two food banks near my hometown to ask, what's the story? And they said, it really takes, for a lot of people, it's a loss of dignity to walk in a food bank.
Of course.
But they were seeing a new phenomenon, that it wasn't their traditional clientele. It wasn't people who'd lost their homes. It wasn't people out on the street. These were working families who could no longer, $100 at the grocery store, that basket of groceries every week, they were missing 5, 6, 7 things, and they were coming to the food bank to top up. So that's not a great America. Record European vacation, record food banks.
Tweety Bird says, I find this to be a deeply compassionate regime. And I don't know how you couldn't. It makes me angry when I see people posting slanderously about Bessent being gay. I don't care if he's gay. I care that he's a Treasury Secretary who was going to food banks to get a feel for the situation last year. I care that he's a Treasury Secretary who actually notices a fact and remembers it and then talks about it publicly. Like, more Americans took European vacations than ever before, and more Americans went to food banks than ever before in the same year. If that doesn't perfectly illustrate the world that so-called free marketeers created, I don't know what does. The top 10% of Americans own 88% of equities. So you got a 90-10 distribution right here. 10% of Americans owning 90% of equities. I mean, I know that these distributions are pretty normal, but 10% owning 90% in an economy that's been engineered to make owning equities a really, really big deal, the most important thing ever, that's astonishing. And then the next 40% owns 12%. The bottom 50% has debt. This is the world that the regime created. The people who stand against whatever MAGA is, this is the world that they created. The world they were trying to sustain. You can see why it wasn't going to last. Every single person out there who wants to yell about tariffs or any of these things, I don't care, man. What they're doing with the reordering of the global economic system, they could do nothing else. And I would still want them to just proceed untrammeled. Just resolve this issue. Anything you do above and beyond that is gravy. Oh, but they're also undertaking the largest deportation effort in American history. They've completely shut off the border. They're going after the university system. How can you not be satisfied? I don't mean satisfied as in, okay, job's done. I mean, how can you not find this acceptable? This is beyond acceptable. This is more than I could have ever dreamed of. I thought it was going to be decades before we would get an administration that actually cared about the country, that actually tried to do things to help Americans, that weren't just a bunch of soulless ghouls. They can't do everything. If you're expecting them to do everything, you are a soulless ghoul. They're going to clear out the playing field. But then it's up to us to go play on the playing field. It's like they're chartering the boat that's going to get you to the new unexplored continent, but it's up to you to go explore the continent and begin settling it. Now all the people who are just complaining and doom fapping, and they're like sitting on the boat. They're down below deck, just like complaining that, oh, it's a vast wilderness out there that's completely unsettled. Nobody's built a Starbucks for me yet. That's what they sound like. $5 super chat, 5 Canadian dollars from QWERTY ZZ7. Says the stock market is not part of the real economy. If it's not real, it must be fake and gay. Yeah, ipso facto. Thank you for the super chat, sir. Taylor Brown says people ought to be grateful there's an opportunity to relatively peacefully handle this. Could easily be looking at 1789 France. Yeah, that was the upshot of where we were heading. We still may get a little bit of that, but I'm hoping not. It's hilarious to me to see the people who talk about the administration as like it's not even hilarious. It's baffling to me to see the people who talk about this administration as if they're like chaotic and don't have any idea what they're doing, and they're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and they're in over their heads. They don't know what they're doing, whatever. Like this group of people is more intelligent and sophisticated than any collection of people that the previous regime could have put together. They've been sitting here for months, just explicitly delineating to you every single thing that they're going to address and how they're going to address it. Explaining how they believe it developed, from trade to lawfare to immigration to any of these other major issues of theirs. They're giving you comprehensive delineations of how we got to this point, why we got to this point, who got us to this point, what they're going to do to get us away from this point, and what they're expecting the consequences of that to have. When they said most transparent administration in history, that wasn't just like a marketing jingle. They genuinely have been. They've established a new baseline for a presidential administration. The press hasn't really caught up to this, and there's still a lot of people who they still have press brain. But future administrations that don't engage in this way aren't going to get elected. They're not even going to get elected in the first place to become an administration. They got to start it at the campaign level. You got to have a good social media game. You got to have people who can talk. Every single person in the administration can talk. They're all compelling, talented, gifted speakers who interview well. They're attractive. They carry themselves well, regardless of where they fall on the political spectrum. Even RFK can talk. It's harder for RFK than others, but he can still talk. Any future campaign is going to have at least a semblance of this. They're going to have to hit all the podcast circuits. They're going to have to be able to really delineate exactly what they believe and why and what they're going to do. They're going to have to be high quality. Because we've just begun. We're 3 months into this, not even. We're going to get 4 years of this. We don't even have the faintest idea of what the United States is going to look like in 2028. It's going to be such a completely different country. $20 super chat from Belial Bradley. Thank you. Says pair character sliding on the floor on his knees, yelling goal. I appreciate the super chat. I'm not quite sure what that's supposed to mean. Pair character, sliding on the floor on his knees, saying goal. That looks like something somebody would put into a GIF tool to like searching for a GIF. But yeah, feel free to post a clarifier. I don't know what that means. Connor Grunderson says tariffs on Israel should be a white pill for Juicebergs. Huh, yeah, indeed. And it's funny that they were like, "Oh, we're going to drop our tariffs," so they're like, "We're going to hit you with tariffs anyways because of the trade disparities." And then $10 from Slosher. He says Michael Malice was right. Trump is not the river; he's the dam. He's holding back and channeling a horde of angry people. He is the peaceful option. Yes, that is exactly right. He is the peaceful option. Okay, people are saying that there's a GIF in here, so I gotta. Oh, there's a GIF in the chat. Hey, I recognized it. Oh, I see it. Okay, yeah. If I look over here on YouTube, I can see it. That's funny. Thank you, sir. Okay, let's get some more Scott Bessent.
Working.
You guys can tell I listen to everything on 2x. I love that YouTube has now enabled you to go up to at least 3x. So now I listen to everything on 2.5.
Working. Would it have been really fun for me to come in and just keep issuing a lot of debt? And you know, it's almost like a bodybuilder is taking steroids. Outside looks great. You know, you're muscular. Inside, you're killing your vital organs. Yeah. That's what was going on here. But it would have been easy to keep pumping up the economy, borrowing a lot of money, creating a lot of government jobs. There was no controversy when we're doing all that. But you were going to end up in a calamity. If you go back and look, you look at the financial crisis in 07, 08, economy looked great right up until then. You go back and you look at the end of the dot-com bubble and then the whole credit problem with the fraud at WorldCom, Enron, some other companies. Economy looked great until it didn't. And I think one of the things that we won't get credit for, but that this administration will have done, is avoiding a financial calamity.
This is a very good point. What they're actually doing, everyone's saying that they're trying to create one. What they're actually doing is avoiding the financial calamity. And they're doing virtually everything that would be recommended in this point. They're the ones who have the plan. Nobody else even had a plan for how to get around this. Libertarians were just like, end the Fed. Nobody else had even the conception of a plan. They have a plan. And I think it's going to work. And I believe that they are going to get credit for it. I think in retrospect, they are going to get credit for it. Not now, and it may take some administrations later, but I think ultimately we are going to look back on this administration for how transformative and just in the nick of time it was. And I think it's important to remember this point as well, that he said it would have been easy to keep pumping up the economy, borrowing a lot of money and creating a lot of government jobs. It would have been. Like, if you think these people are in here just for, I don't know, their own power-thirsty motivations or whatever, they're taking the hard road. It would have been really easy for them to just go stay the course. There would have been no friction at all. They could have just stayed the course. They're doing the hard thing under incredible political pressure. Now, he had some interesting things to say about gold and Bitcoin. And in particular, he has one comment in here about Bitcoin that if you followed Scott for a while, none of this is surprising to hear from him. But we're getting the Treasury Secretary talking to the most important, famous journalist in the country about gold and Bitcoin right after a tariff war was ignited.
Why is gold moving around the world in such huge quantities right now?
Well, a couple of things. It's moving. Physically, it's moving because of potential tariffs here. So, like, it was unclear whether we were going to exempt gold from tariffs, which I believe we have. So there was a big move out of vaults in Switzerland, out of vaults in London to get it into New York. And look, that there are a lot of different stores of value over time. Bitcoin's becoming a store of value. Gold is.
That's the one right there. Bitcoin's becoming a store of value. Mark this day on your calendars, folks. The U.S. Treasury Secretary just said Bitcoin's becoming a store of value. And it is worth noting, go look at the Bitcoin price. Not exactly where the price is, but look at Bitcoin's action over the past few days relative to the rest of the market. It's very interesting.
Historically been a store of value. I think what's interesting is, where do we see the gold demand coming from? A huge amount is from China.
Yes.
Where they, as I said, they're in the middle of an economic recession/depression. People don't trust the Chinese currency because they have capital controls. There are 1.4 billion Chinese who all want to get their money out, and they won't let them. They will let them buy gold.
So that's a response, you think. But it's just, do you find it interesting that even now, 2025, when everything is abstract and digital, that gold is still widely believed globally to be a reliable store of value?
I think that gold has a lot of history going with it.
Yeah.
That a friend of mine's grandmother, during Russia had a financial crisis in '98. Then they had a big inflation, and a friend of mine's grandmother went out and bought 18 bicycles and put them in her apartment, and that was her store of value.
Yes.
So
how'd she do on the bike investment?
Great.
Yeah.
Great. I wish I did that well. So, yeah, but that, look, yeah, gold also has other applications, a lot of applications, jewelry in India, but it's something that historically people have all agreed on. And gold can't have a fiscal problem. Gold cannot have a gigantic budget deficit. Gold cannot have a war. So just the fact that it is this isolated thing makes it very interesting. And the fact that the entire global trading system, until Richard Nixon took us off, was tied to gold.
So you're not anti-gold?
Oh, no. When I had my fund, I think people might have called me a gold bug.
I'm pretty sure he has half of his something like half of his net worth in gold, or maybe it was half of his fund. I'm not sure. Very, very interesting, telling comments there. Again, coming from the Treasury Secretary. Got a Treasury Secretary who's talking about the features of gold here in its stabilizing ability. The fact that it has a calming effect. When gold is being basically what he's kind of talking around here is, when you have global trade, and particularly your money that is in some way tied to gold, then you don't get all these things. You don't get wars. You can't have like a fiscal crisis. I think that we're going to get some sort of I don't think it's going to be it's going to be like gold notes. We're going to have, gold is going to be in a certain way. There's so many different ways they can do it, but in some certain way, gold is going to be brought back and reincorporated in the U.S. dollar in some way, some sort of creative way. There's lots of different rumors that are bouncing around. But Trump has surrounded himself with these types of people for a long time, and he went and made his Treasury Secretary, a notorious gold bug. You got some interesting comments here about the Fed pushing DEI, forcing regulatory policies, and climate change. This is to me, I thought this section was interesting because I'm curious. I haven't completely figured out yet to what extent Powell and Bessent are like completely simpatico, or if there's some sort of like a tension or opposition there. They've been pretty clear about the administration's been pretty clear about how we're treating the Fed as independent, but some of that kind of seems rhetorical, and a lot of their actions point naturally in the direction of really bringing the Fed back into line and restoring it closer to its original mandate. And I also don't think that Powell would necessarily be opposed to that, but I still haven't gotten a real good read on their relationship to one another. But I kind of suspect that they at least have respect for one another.
Can I ask you a weird question? Who runs the Federal Reserve exactly? I don't really. How can you have this like pivotal institution that obviously has like the most direct effect on markets of any, and it does seem outside of political control? What is that?
Well, look, I think that during my confirmation hearing, and I was actually at a dinner that Jerome Powell was at last night. At my confirmation hearing, I said, I'm only going to talk about the mistakes the Federal Reserve has made in the past. I won't talk about the ones they're going to make in the future, right? But I think it is important for monetary policy that they are walled off, that some of the other things they do, regulation, they got into DEI, they got into climate, I actually think that impinges on their monetary policy and makes them vulnerable. So I think that they should focus on monetary policy, doing the best that they can for the American economy, the American people, keeping inflation low, and then the rest. There are a lot of other banking agencies too.
So the Fed controls the weather now too? What were they doing with climate?
Well, I will tell you, there's something that the Treasury Secretary chairs something called the Financial Stability Oversight Council, and it's all the financial regulators. And I think it was 2 weeks before Silicon Valley Bank went under, FSOC issued a report. And guess what they said the biggest risk to the financial system was? Climate.
Really?
Not that there was a large bank in California that was having a slow motion run on its assets, and that it would cause another bank failure, then another bank failure. It was climate. So as far as I can see, climate's been pretty good. They failed. The regulators failed. And I think that's what people are getting sick of. And it's back to one of my favorite phrases that President Trump uses, common sense.
Yes.
Look, it's just common sense that if you have a whole bunch of deposits that could leave your bank with a click, you shouldn't have all these long-term assets, but they were too busy worrying about the weather. And there was also some degree of regulatory capture. Seems hard to believe to the average citizen. The CEO of Silicon Valley Bank was on the board of the San Francisco Federal Reserve, who was his chief regulator. They're going to tell that guy what to do?
I love the man. Let me get some of your comments here. The Iceman said, I work on coastal elite millionaire homes. These people are in a bubble. They don't realize when smaller dominoes to their left and right fall, the masses will eat their brains out with a frosty spoon. You've got a way with words, my friend. That is well put. Something here from Phil Gibson says, pretty sure Powell and Diamond probably had a big role in appointing Bessent. Stormy said Diamond like handpicked him. They're fucking Chad bros, Wall Street Chad bros, the patrons of White Boy Summer. That's good. That's good to hear. I want to believe. I want to believe. I just don't, I want to make sure that I'm not reading too much of my own desires into this. I would love to know that this is something that, Powell and Diamond together went and recruited Bessent and brought Bessent in and said, Don, this is your man. And he was like, all right, sounds good. I know that it was interesting thinking back now that there seemed to be kind of a little tussle going on about whether it was going to be Bessent or Lutnick, and that from the sound of it, Lutnick wanted the Treasury position, but which then makes me wonder again about, my jury's kind of still out on Lutnick for me a little bit, but yeah, I also don't know if that story was just slop. It wasn't actually true. Just stuff like the story that Bessent is tired and got in, doesn't like where things are going and is looking for his way out. Like everything that I just played for you guys. Does that sound like a guy who is like, this isn't what he signed up for and he's on his way out? Yeah. Preposterous. All you have to do is just sit and listen to the man talk for a little while, and it's very obvious that's a completely fake story. Now, referring to a story we talked about recently, Geiger Capital put forth the hypothesis that Trump is Volckering himself. And here he says Scott Bessent literally just said it. Now, he doesn't literally just say it, but he comes kind of close.
I was a freshman in college when Ronald Reagan came in 1980, and New Day in America. And when I talk to people now, and they look back and they look at the Reagan years so fondly,
yes,
I remember what it was like, and it was choppy. And the president,
very choppy.
President Reagan stood the course. And look, this is not an invitation, but at one point in the early 80s, a farmer showed up with a shotgun at the Federal Reserve to kill Paul Volcker for raising rates. So, like I said, that's not an invitation for anybody for action, but it was a tough time. And then in 1984, President Reagan won re-election with 49 states. And I think they may have even let Mondale win Minnesota just so it wasn't a skunk.
Just to be nice, yeah.
And that's what President Trump is doing now. I was afraid.
So that's where he comes very close to saying, basically, Trump is Volckering himself. Phil says, if anything, Powell takes orders from Diamond. Diamond literally owns shares of the New York Fed. Yeah, right. Yes, of course. It's interesting to think, you're talking about Stormy here. Stormy's probably busy doing shit. He runs a VC fund. Key One has been rough. Think about everything that's happening right now. So all the political shenanigans and everything, and then they're building up to this big Liberation Day, putting the tariffs on. Now the whole world is screaming and crying. The stock market is burning down. All the libs are going crazy. Other countries are burning up the phone lines. Ah! And the Treasury Secretary takes over an hour out of his day to go sit down and have a conversation at this point with Tucker Carlson. For anybody who doesn't believe that Tucker Carlson is two things. One, that Tucker Carlson is a voice for the administration, a trusted voice for the administration, or that this administration is just like, if we were like, oh, they're doing these interviews, but it's like, yeah, just kind of whatever. No, doing this interview was a top priority for him because they want to get out ahead of this and they want to be completely abundantly clear about what they're doing. They're signaling this to the people. So the people, Tucker's got a large audience, particularly probably got quite a few boomers in his audience. And they're saying to the people, we're doing this for you. They're also doing this for the sake of the markets. to give signals, because what they don't need is to have everything just completely go nuclear. There's lots of risks here, and the last thing they need is a bunch of like really high profile bankruptcies and historic companies collapsing and funds going under. And once that stuff starts happening, you need it. You don't need to completely bankrupt these different institutions right away, because that's a lot of political heat that will make things much more difficult. There's a lot of these companies and funds and stuff that need to go away, but you don't want them all collapsing all at once. So you need to give enough signals to the market so that the actual serious people out there can take them in and then adjust accordingly. And the press is not going to cover them fairly. They've got some of their media people and stuff that will do it, but he made, in the middle of all this, he made it a top priority to go spend an hour and a half talking to Tucker Carlson to go through all these things. So the administration wants the Treasury Secretary to go on Tucker Carlson and explain everything that's happening. That's a top priority on the to-do list. Maybe one of my favorite leaks or people sharing secrets from behind the scenes of all time. I think this was from WAPO. Leading Report tweets about it here. Breaking. President Trump is, quote, this is per a White House official, quote, he is at the peak of just not giving a fuck anymore. Bad news stories, doesn't give a fuck. He's going to do what he's going to do. I voted for this. That's exactly what I voted for. I want my president to just not give a fuck. Bad news stories, doesn't give a fuck. He's going to do what he's going to do. Because you know what? You can just do things. And he is the king of just doing things. Yeah, you forgot to attach the Giga Chat image. Yeah, right. This is a good point from Josh Ham. He says, realistically, the American stock market needs to not be such lemmings. The sackcloth and ashes is not appropriate for Americans. Hear, hear. You hear that, stonks, bros? Quit the belly aching. But yeah, man. Couple more headlines from Leading Report. These two go together. Number one, breaking. United States added 228,000 jobs in March, blowing past economists' expectations, per ABC News. 228,000 jobs. And you know that this jobs report was not boosted by a bunch of government jobs, because a bunch of government people are getting canned. They added 228,000 jobs in March. Story number two. Sorry, Leaf Bros. Breaking. Canadian economy lost 33,000 jobs in March, the biggest loss since 2022, while the U.S. exceeded expectations. Now, I'm not going to celebrate the Leaf Bros losing their jobs. I don't want Canadians to lose their jobs. I want the Canadians to be happy and successful and prosperous. I want to have a great relationship with our brothers above the border. I lived above the border for 4 years. I have good friends who still live up there. We've got some great guys in the King Pill Discord who live up there. We've got Slosher. We've got I can't even remember what it's Cordy ZZ7. I don't want to dox any more than that. We've got our Canadian bros. But you guys got to recognize the country, Canada cannot sustain itself as a sovereign, independent nation while it being engaged in hostilities with the United States. You just can't. It's never going to be possible. And the sooner that Canada bends the knee, and just submits and cooperates and allows themselves to be brought under the security umbrella, the better. It'll be better for everyone involved. It's preposterous to suggest that the United States in this era and in the era of history we're moving into would not have absolute control over the continent. It's just silly. It's an empire that is retrenching its homeland. And what do empires do? They expand. Doesn't matter how you feel about it, it's going to happen. And it's a good thing that it happens. That's actually one of the only ways that Canada is going to survive. Because the alternatives are, as Canada's not going to sustain itself wholly independently. It's going to have to be subservient to someone. So who are you going to be subservient to? Are you going to be subservient to the most powerful, independently capable of maintaining itself, Big Brother right next door? Or are you going to subvert yourself to a bunch of bankrupt, degenerate commies across an ocean that don't actually give a shit about Canada and just see Canada as another place that they can strip mine to facilitate their own agendas? Canada bending the knee to the United States is the best way to protect and preserve Canada as Canada. You care about the future of Canada. You want that. If you're a proud Canadian nationalist, you have to recognize that inevitability. That it is going to happen. And it's better that it happen peacefully and cooperatively and quickly than that it be a big, protracted, drawn-out, ugly Ukraine-Russia redux. I think of Jason Miranchuk as the proud Ukrainian nationalist who recognized a long time ago and came to grips with the fact that, yeah, Ukraine is just going to get reabsorbed into Russia effectively, or it's going to get completely cut up and carved up, and like these are just the ways of the world. This is the way the world's going. You can't fight against this sort of thing. Fighting against it just makes it worse. So it doesn't make me happy that Canada lost these jobs. I want to see Canada start adding jobs. I want to see them healthy and robust. The only way that's going to happen is by acquiescing to the Fanta Führer. Now, a little bit of a, I don't have much to say on this one, but just something to put a pin in. Think about. Tom Luongo highlighted this. Crypto Briefing says, just in, Tether is considering launching a new stablecoin targeted at the U.S. market, according to the information. And Tom says it couldn't be the beginning of a domestic digital U.S. dollar to circulate behind a tariff wall now, could it? Huh. Imagine that. Imagine that. Tether just so happens to be something like the 7th largest holder of U.S. treasuries. And they're going to be much larger. And they went from like 16th to 7th, I think, in a year. And that's just going to continue. The Commerce Secretary is heavily invested in Tether. And the people who are, many of the people who are openly backing the Trump administration have a lot of overlap with the Tether world. Phil Gibson says, Tether is the darling of the Fed. Read it and weep. Yes. Tether has been given the implicit stamp of approval by the Fed already. And it just makes way too much sense. This is how, incidentally, this is how they can maintain the beneficial aspects of the dollar being the world reserve currency, while also ameliorating some of the negative aspects of it. Because by formally integrating Tether and the U.S. dollar as part of the actual monetary policy from the government, you can ensure that the dollar now becomes effectively the Forex. It's not a token. The dollar wouldn't be a token per se in that sense, but you absorb the Forex market with the dollar effectively. But it's able to happen digitally while maintaining the tariff walls. I'm very interested to see where this goes. And if you think that this is a central bank digital currency, then go read a book. Wade Stotts. Look at our boy. I don't know when this started, but over the last couple of weeks, I've seen him on Fox News more and more. And this is fantastic. We now have one of our best posters going on Fox News to dunk on the grifters directly to their face. So here's him with Will Kane. And watch their faces in this. Watch Wade's face. Watch Will's face. And watch, what's her name? Lindy Lee, I think. We've talked about her in the past. She was the one who, she's a Democrat fundraiser who shortly after the election suddenly went on a tear talking about how corrupt and terrible it is and everything. And now she's only going to work for Republicans. And Wade gives her the old what for here.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at this behavior. These are people with no core beliefs. They just say whatever's most advantageous to them personally at that moment. You know, it's almost as bad as a person who raised tens of millions for Kamala trying to pass herself off as a right-wing influencer on her the second her team loses. So I don't know what Linda thinks about that, but just my opinion.
I've been on Fox News for years saying that I'm a conservative Democrat. This is not a sudden switch at all. It's been a years-long evolution. And I've been warring against the leftist faction, the Democratic for years. They tried to cancel me 5 years ago because I went to war with the Bernie bros. Because I urged the party to be
it's hilarious to hear Lindy Lee slamming Democrats for being duplicitous. She was a Democrat until 5 minutes ago. The only belief she's kept from 6 months ago is that she should be in charge of moving large sums of money. And that's it. You know, if you think you're going to be able to avoid conversations about your loyalty, you're delusional. So you've said that Fox News had a, quote, Christo-fascist vision for America. You said that Rupert Murdoch, quote, broke American democracy. You said that anti-woke is code for anti-black. And now you're on Fox talking about how fickle other people are. Which version of you was the real version? And, you know, why should we listen to you now? Why should we take that seriously?
I was the only Democrat this entire election cycle willing to expose the corruption and the billions of dollars that were wasted. No one else spoke up. Okay, so
the billions of dollars you raised, and you were dissatisfied with how it was spent. You were dissatisfied with how the money you raised was spent, which is not the same thing as having a political conversion. Not liking how the money was raised. The money you raised was spent.
I don't want to interrupt this debate. I find it fascinating. I didn't know this is the way it was going to go. I'll spend another minute on it before we get to our other topic. But Wade.
Oh, man. Look at Will's face right here. Ho ho! Jackpot. This is like when what's his name? Piers Morgan. When somebody starts going off on someone else on one of his panel shows, you could just see the moment that he gets the warm fuzzies and just starts purring. He's just sitting there purring, watching these people dragging each other on his show. You can see Will was like, whoa, didn't see that coming. And I'm impressed with Wade. Wade is such a nice guy. He is one of the best human beings I've ever interacted with. He's such a good dude. And to see him go in there gloves off was I didn't know you had it in you, brother. This is fantastic. We're now making the inroads from Twitter to the legacy press. We now have our guys being delegated to go on there and obliterate these people, and it's wonderful. All right, so let's get a little bit of Devin Erickson action up in here. He may spell it wrong, but he's a good one. So we got to set the stage first, because he is reacting to this. First of all, we have this clip from Elon.
And we are going to be able to take astronauts to Mars. In fact, we want to take anyone who goes to Mars and ultimately build a self-sustaining civilization on Mars. That is the long-term goal of the company. Make life multi-planetary.
I mean, that is a very bold vision. How long do you think that might take SpaceX to be able to accomplish?
I think we could do it in 20 to 30 years.
Mm-hmm. So really, in a lifetime, if God blesses me with a longer life than I deserve, right? I could always help.
And we are going to...
So this thing here increasingly reclusive LGBT plus inclusive person, a bit sweary, Miffy the Gamer. I believe Miffy the Gamer should be continuing to be increasingly reclusive, not nearly increasingly reclusive, not nearly reclusive enough. Says, why the buggery bollocks would anyone in their right mind want to go to Mars? There's fuck all there. If Draylon, where did Draylon come from? Draylon. I'm trying to think of, how does the lib think? How would the, I can't even begin to think of how they came up with Draylon. If Draylon thinks Mars is so cool, then he's perfectly free to fuck off there right now on one of his wonky rockets. Devin Erickson. I could just imagine Devin Erickson, you know, like cracking his knuckles, rubbing his hands together a little bit, kind of stretching. All right, let's go. Fags getting dragged. If the Spanish had known there was a bloody great continent in the way, stretching almost from pole to pole with almost nothing in the way of spices, they would never have set off for the New World in the first place. When they got there, they figured there were no spices. They weren't even in South Asia. Or when they got there, figured out there were no spices. They weren't even in South Asia, and the world was bigger than they thought. They looked around for gold and silver. When they found some, they had an inflation crisis. It was called the Spanish Price Revolution. Crashed their whole economy. They thought of value in terms of what they already knew. But humanity advances by finding value in new things. America didn't bankrupt the English and the Dutch. It enriched them. Why? Because instead of looking for their preconceptions of value, they adapted their minds to see the value in what was actually there in front of them. Tobacco, sugarcane, potatoes. Yes, the humble potato. It was more valuable than gold. Why? Think about this. By 1847, 100 years after the conquest of the New World really got swinging, the Irish had become so dependent upon the potato that a blight year caused widespread famine and almost wiped them out. The New World had lots of land and forests and stuff, but the potato was even better because it was land. See, the potato produces an order of magnitude more calories per acre than any old world crop known in Europe at the time. That means you can use the same agricultural territory to feed more people. It was as if the British Empire had found not only land, but also a special kind of land that they could pack up and take back to Europe with them. Suddenly, the British Empire could feed more people. More clerks, more mechanics, more soldiers, more sailors, more industry, more wealth. Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. These things have consequences. And of course, the ones who went there and stayed became the richest, most powerful nation in the known universe to date. The moral here is that the future belongs to those who can understand not just what is valuable now, but what will become valuable tomorrow. If you look at Mars in terms of what's valuable on Earth, well, it's a giant frozen desert where you can't grow plants in the soil because it's poisonous, and you can't step outside in the daytime because it's raining deadly radiation. Doesn't sound nice, does it? Which is why all the puddlefish don't get it. They're not wise investors. They're not thinking in terms of what will be valuable. So what will be valuable about Mars? Escape velocity. That's what. If you look at Zillow today, you don't see plots advertised as having a good escape velocity, of course. It's all the same, 11.2 kilometers per second. But if it varied, like it might in the future, 11.2 kilometers per second would really drive prices down because that's a crappy escape velocity to have. It really, really inhibits your ability to leave the property and go out and sightsee or pick up, groceries or 80 million tons of rare earth metals from your local asteroid belt, whatever you happen to need. In fact, if that 11.2 kilometers per second had been much higher, humanity would have been fucked on the Kardashev scale at least, almost as badly as aquatic intelligent species that can't discover fire. If it had been much higher, we'd have been unable to leave the planet or even throw things into orbit using chemical means, which means that your satellite TV receiver would have had to wait until we discovered lightweight fusion containment. Lots of luck, hypothetical heavy world species. But when Zillow starts listing Martian real estate, ads might just lead with that escape velocity, because 5.03 kilometers per second is a really nice escape velocity, a must-have for all the really swanky neighborhoods. It's just heavy enough so you can live on the surface comfortably, but nice and light if you want to pop out for a bit. Good news, your new home is convenient to nearby asteroid belts, which is nice if you fancy a quick trip to pick up, say, $16 quadrillion worth of metals in today's prices. And little things like that are really a must-have for those vulgar, ambitious, try-hard species who are obsessed with climbing the Kardashev scale and becoming immortal super beings or some kind of tacky nonsense like that, instead of staying home and cultivating inner peace. Sure, some people think you could do all this with robots and just have the humans stay home, so no need for Mars, specifically because all the robots can be happy in space. But something about my multi-decade career in embedded software engineering may have just made me a little bit skeptical about our ability to make robots that can handle the entire tech stack of human civilization by themselves, then take it to the next level. Trust me here, Grok may be really slick at rearranging human-generated datasets to turn a colorful phrase, or looking up facts on an internet made by humans, but for anything that requires actual innovation or judgment, it's dumb as a sack of wet hammers. And hard AI is not just around the corner. If you think it is, you don't understand the nature of intelligence and are easily fooled by party tricks. But even if I'm wrong, even if you're going to be sending autonomous super robots instead of actual human beings, even if you're not going to Mars in particular, you still need the same thing. Rockets. Lots and lots of really, really big rockets. Ad Astra, per big bucks. The man knows how to turn a phrase. Dragging fuck tons of silver back to Spain, sending that bitch all the way to Manila. Paul Suda. There's something about rockets that are just like, they're just so freaking cool. Maybe it's the phallic nature of it that just appeals to the soul of the man. He sees himself in it. Yes, we're gonna go fuck the universe, penetrate the sky. So no wonder that Miffy the gamer doesn't get it. I'm fascinated by these comparisons between the Trump's in the chat. Thank you, Slutty Milk. We got the Trumps in here. I'm fascinated by the comparisons between, you've got the old world and the new world, and then you've got the new world and space, or the new world and the digital world. I think there's a lot to be learned from comparing the two of them. Whether it's the psychology of people who came to the new world and began exploring it and settling it, conquering the frontier. The digital world is effectively like a new continent like that. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of it. It's like we're like in the 13 colonies stage of exploring the internet. What the digital world is, what social media, digital social media, what that means. I think we've just begun. Maybe we're like at the Articles of Confederation stage or something like that, and we have an entire empire ahead of us that's going to be constructed. We got 109 watching. We're going to get 110. Oh, no, 107. That's not good. We're going to the wrong direction. We don't want to add them back in. Hit the like button for me, folks. My wife says Eastwood asked tonight if I would fly on his rocket ship and said he would bring Carsick meds for me. The kids still want to go to space fearlessly. The kids, there's two things the kids long for: Mars and the mines. So imagine mining on Mars. All right, now this is going to be a little bit of a long one here. Got a Homath long post and then a Devin Erickson response. I'm not going to play this, but Ian Miles Chong says, "Could someone explain what this is?" And I had to click the show tweet on this here because I have Ian Miles Chong blocked. I never would have seen this in the first place. I'm not going to play it because I think this sort of thing just shouldn't even be broadcast. But here is the little graphic that Homath is going to be referencing. And we're going to be, I'm generally a fan of Homath, but we're going to be in Homath critique mode here today because Devin Erickson has a critical response to him. But I've got to read the Homath tweet before I read you the Devin tweet. So Ian had said, "Can someone explain what this is?" And Homath says, "Yes, I can. This is going to clear a lot up. Go pee or get a glass of water first. You're going to need a minute to process." Welcome back. Have you noticed yet how leftists gravitate to certain things? How, sort of the same way that conservatives go hunting and fishing and watch sports, Leftoid goblin perverts like these cluster around things like anime, video games, sexual deviancy, and anthropomorphism. Well, conservatives do those things because that's what everyone else did. Daddy hunted. Grandpappy was Calvinist. But no one has done any of this dog mask shit before. Now, if you ask them, they might tell you that they choose these things because they are progressive. We are creative souls expressing who we truly are, or whatever. But if that was true, wouldn't they all have their own individualistic expressions of self? Why would pup play become popular with, what is it, like 10% of them now? A while ago, Matt Walsh stated, perhaps rhetorically rather than conversationally, that he felt that anime was satanic, though he could not explain why. I offered to explain why in exchange for exposure, which isn't coming, I guess, so I'll reveal the through line now. Leftists actively hate their own free will. All of this weird shit they do, those are attempts to rid themselves of responsibility. They don't want to be held accountable for anything. You know, like what we complain about in typical immature women. I'm a dog equals I'm just a dumb animal, care for me. This is why children's cartoons are always animals. Animal nature equals child nature equals innocent equals no free will. I'm actually a woman equals I'm valuable because I exist, not because of what I do. This is one very good. He's got good stuff in here, and then he's got some less good stuff that Devin Erickson will react to, and I'll react to as well. Some of this is good though. The distinction between men and women is women are valuable because they exist. Men are valuable because of what they do. Games equal, I still have to play and learn. I'm not a grown-up yet. Communism equals, guarantee me an income even if I do nothing. Even most homosexuality equals, I'm in the girl's role now. This happens to me, not because I earned it, but because I'm here. What does this have to do with anime? Well, there's a reason I use cartoons in my videos. It's because they're simple, like games, like ABC 1, 2, 3. Cartoons are a way of depicting only the parts of something that you want people to look at. Look at these faces I drew in the image that I showed you before I started reading. The male one is just 3 circles, 2 dots, and a wavy line. There's very little room for interpretation. He's puzzled. She's disappointed. All the remaining complexity of humanity is stripped away. Drawing cartoons equals, I did all the work of interpretation for you. That's why people come to me. I teach things quickly by showing you only what you need to see. Cartoons, anime in particular, are similarly stripped down. And anime in particular acts as a gateway drug because it is so widely used as a style. You can jump from artist to artist without feeling like you've changed channels. And there's infinite content, so you spiral downward into self-imposed infancy, which is satanic. You start with Akira or Cowboy Bebop. You end up developing feelings for anime girls who are easily idealized because they're the only bits of girls that you... They are only the bits of girls that you like, with none of that pesky human nature. You desire simpler, less human. Your chosen content gets more and more childish. Disney, My Little Pony, whatever the internet has to offer, anything you can think of. You get sucked into the feeling of experiencing only the good parts of life and none of the downsides, and before long it comes out in your politics. I should be a baby, feed me, wah, is all the left says anymore. And since we are long past the point where anyone who falls into this soul blender can easily find others to support their delusions with a few clicks, we now have them acting it out in public under the guise of art or identity. Look at absolutely any weird thing the left does, and what you will find is, I'm baby. I deserve. No one wants to grow up, and you can't blame them. It doesn't pay anymore. Finally, if that wasn't enough for you for one day, go read about who Aleister Crowley was and what the Aeon of Horus was. He says, there are animes and video games with right-wing values. Fish, you say hooks are dangerous, but many hooks have worms on them, which are good for eating. So, obviously, he anytime that you post that you post anything negative about anime, you're going to get lots of interactions, which is probably part of the reasons why I don't typically tell people how I actually feel about anime. But here is Devin Erickson's reaction. First of all, let me see what this image was down here. Of all animal pictures known to me, this is the most man-like. Devin says, this argument is a speed run of how the right lost the culture war for 3 decades and almost destroyed Western civilization by so doing. The right became infected with two terrible assumptions. One, that childishness is bad. Two, that play is for children. Both of these assumptions are based on a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature, how humans work, and why humans are the dominant species on Earth. The difference between a human and a great ape is a special kind of genetic adaptation called neoteny. It means the retention of juvenile traits into adulthood. To a large degree, humans became humans by retaining the traits of baby apes and adult apes. Not just the facial physiology, but the curiosity, neuroplasticity, and yes, the tendency to play. To understand why this helped humans, you have to understand what play is, beyond the knee-jerk common sense reaction of frivolous things children do to entertain themselves. But that's not an explanation of what play is. Because why does play entertain children? Why are they evolved to like it? Because play, games, and stories are training for adult responsibilities. Kittens pounce on string, chase each other, and wrestle because pouncing, chasing, and wrestling are the responsibilities of an adult cat. If two little boys find two sticks, they will sword fight with them. Hell, if you give a little boy a fucking Pop-Tart, he will bite it into the shape of a pistol and run around yelling bang. But what about adults? Most adult animals don't play much compared to when they were kids, and don't learn much either, because there isn't a whole lot left to learn that they are actually capable of learning. At least not compared to the volume and rate of learning that they experience as children. But humans, the galaxy brain geniuses of the animal kingdom, have the capacity to learn at a high rate throughout life. And neotenously retaining childhood traits equips us with the urges to match that capability. Human beings not only can and do play throughout life, they must, or their learning abilities stagnate and atrophy and their emotional health suffers. If you teach an adult that play, fun, games, and stories are childish things that he should put away when he becomes a man, after a decade or so, you have a dullard, fit only for manual labor or routine and repeated application of rote processes. Is Homath such a person? Of course not. He has risen to internet fame by playing, by drawing anime and telling stories. His actions demonstrate an innate understanding that cartoons and stories and simple things that explain by removing complexity are not frivolous activities at all. They are vital. But his contempt for leftists, their arrested development, and the way they hide from responsibility has caused him to fall into the same error that came within a hair's breadth of destroying Western civilization. The right abandoned culture. Conservatives stopped making stories and games that expressed their worldview because they decided games were for nerds and stories were for man-children who were too lazy to spend their evenings reading car repair manuals in the Wall Street Journal. By deciding that play was for queers and commies, the right ceded the creation of art, of stories, of games entirely to, well, commies and queers. Of course you lose the culture war if you don't show up and fight it, genius. Fiction and games are the DNA of civilization, and thus they are the battleground on which the culture war is fought. If you don't make games, toys, and stories that express your worldview, people, both children and adults, are going to play with toys created to express other worldviews. And play is learning. So what do you think they're going to learn? You cannot hunt, fish, and baseball your way to cultural relevance, because anyone with a brain that isn't half dead from underuse is going to read fiction, play games, or watch cartoons, and maybe all of these things. Why do you think the entire tech industry became left-coded? Leftism has nothing to do with tech, but video games, Legos, and science fiction do. Engineers couldn't give less of a shit about baseball. Active, curious, playful minds design the future, whether you like that or not. The Wright brothers played with bicycles and kites, and now you can fly to Paris overnight. Probably wouldn't want to, but you can. Elon Musk read The Moon is a harsh mistress with a flashlight under the covers, and now we can catch returning rocket boosters with giant mecha chopsticks. Unless your cultural faction participates in what these people are interested in, you will not recruit them, and they will design a future that doesn't include you. Frankly, sometimes I think the conservatives are still taking their cultural marching orders from a pack of humorless, soulless dullards who would still be losing as hard as ever if the theater kids hadn't pissed off Elon Musk. And I don't think that... There's Paul Suda again. This is a Paul Suda show. I don't think Homath... Last I saw, Homath hadn't directly responded to him. But this is... I I was jumping out of my seat when I saw this tweet several days ago from Devin, because this is it precisely. If we are to actually exercise the influence over the culture that that we are responsible to exercise, frankly, it's going to have to come through this sort of venue. We need to start producing good science fiction, good music, good movies, good books, good art, good sculptures. We have to make the arts great again. We have to do that by embracing play, being willing to not take ourselves so seriously. Charles Spadil had the banger quote that men are romantics masquerading as pragmatics, and women are pragmatics masquerading as romantics. The collapse of the masculine spirit in Western society is in large part because men have lost that impulse for romanticism, which goes back to, I mean, you could tie a whole long, you could trace this through the imposition of the schooling model that we have, the takeover of women as teachers, forcing little boys to go sit in schools and listen to women talk all day versus going out and just breaking stuff, running around and playing. Little boys have to have that. When you take them and you cram them into a school setting and you make them sit there and like memorize things and learn math and whatever else, then you crush the spirit out of them. You crush the romance out of them. You crush the creativity out of them. Then they can't be men. They're just like dysfunctional women. Almost every society and every culture before, I don't know, the last several decades. Strange how so many things have happened in the last several decades. Almost every single one of them was structured the same way. Boys were raised to a certain age with the girls and women. Then the boys left the women and went and spent time with the men. They'd go out and hunt with them or work with them, or they spent all their time around the men. They learned how to be men by being around men. The men will be hard on them in ways that women won't. The women will be hard on them in ways that the men won't, in ways that are really destructive for the spirit of a little boy. Because he's not a little girl. He's a boy. Which means he can only learn how to be a man from a man. I had a clip, I should have remembered it for this here, but I had a clip I saved the other day about the crime statistics for children who are raised. I don't remember if it was children or boys, but those who are raised in a father-only household, those in a mother-only household, and those in a normal functional family household. And a child who is raised, or child or a boy, whatever it was, who is raised in a father-only household has virtually the same outcomes with regard to their likelihood of ending up in prison as the same raised in a mother and father household. It must have been boys. Boys raised by a single mother are significantly more likely to wind up in prison. So it's not just a single parent household for a boy. It's a single parent household where that single parent is a woman. That's the worst possible developmental outcome for a young boy. And I'd say probably with girls, a girl would probably be better off with a single father than with a single mother. This is innate to the way that humanity was created. The man was created first, and the woman was created as a complement, as a helpmeet to the man. The woman's existence is contingent on the man's existence. Women are grounded in men. My wife says children or boys are far more likely to stay in the church if they see their father actively participating in the church. That's true. Georgie says yes, men failed at being romantics because we adopted the female construction of what romantic means. Yes. Yes. Women don't know what romantic means. They just they can experience it when it happens, but a man has to be there to provide it for them. But all these things are connected. The loss of the romantic spirit in men with the longhouse and the loss of the ability to play and the demonization of play. There's probably a Protestant work ethic thing in here as well. But if we're going to take back the arts, if we're going to build our own propaganda institutions, we have to rediscover play. More on this. So Rambo Van Halen says MAGA could do a better job explaining things like tariffs to midwit normies. The globalists have organizations like NPR doing explainer segments to push their agenda. MAGA needs a calm, authoritative voice of reason to inform and educate the American people. He says, related, I'm available, put me in, coach. He says, most Americans have never heard a rational argument for why globalization, mass immigration, and the empire of freedom has been a disaster for the USA. This can't just be some one-off YouTube video or podcast. We need to tell a multitude of personal stories to illustrate the point being broadcast to the public day in and day out. And yes, we have conservative talk radio, but it's highly partisan and directed at an audience that's already on our side. The story we need to tell is for everyone's consumption, not just our people. And it can't be, I don't know if he's necessarily saying this, but it can't be a rational argument. This is the whole point. The rational argument isn't going to do it. It's going to have to be stories. Stories delivered compellingly. He continues. Have you seen Christopher Nolan's Inception? It's the perfect movie. Not exactly my favorite movie, but it's perfect. It's perfect because it has perfect suspension of disbelief. That is, the audience's willingness to accept the premise of a fictional story. The movie is about a group of mercenaries who go into your dreams and implant ideas in your psyche. The suspension of disbelief is perfect because this is how movies work. It's meta. They hypnotize you and grab your attention. And while you're under, they implant things, emotions, ideas, and yes, sometimes even ideology. The American left understands this. That's why they run a better messaging game. They don't sell you the message, they invite and they seduce. Of course, the American conservatives don't get it, and they never have. But the American right and MAGA might have a chance to do it correctly. Some of us understand this, and many of us have experience. For example, I've been doing this for corporate America for several decades, and I'm certainly not the only one. But conservative Inc. still holds sway, and they can't get past pushing blunt propaganda. I hate to pick on Dinesh D'Souza, but his documentaries are a perfect example of what not to do and how to waste money. The blunt propaganda might be an adequate way to fire up the base, but it's ineffective at swaying a skeptical public because you don't seduce by shouting. I truly hope MAGA gets its messaging house in order and starts telling the story it needs to tell, because there's a lot riding on this, and we need to win. And another Paul Suda appearance. He says, I think I figured the American conservatives suck at propaganda phenomenon out. The left promotes its radicals, follows them, gets them elected. The right cancels its radicals. Radicals make great art. There is plenty of propagandist talent on the right. We ain't conservative. The conservatives need to go the way of the dodo. Fortunately, many things are moving this direction. Many people are saying this. It just so happens that there is a propaganda apparatus being built in real time. You guys can participate in it. More to come soon, but go to ewbsx.app. If you have an Android phone, you can download EWBSX. Just search for it in the Google Play Store. Download it. Begin listening. And stay tuned for much, much more to come. We have many grand visions. The cyberbully has many grand visions. We are but his humble servants, helping him to attain his great grand vision. We'll have many ways for you guys to get involved with us and contribute to whatever extent you would like to. So stay tuned. Stand back. Stand by. Stay tuned. Let's wrap it up with a super chat from Ruthuglican. $10. Thank you, my friend. He says, I'm about an hour behind, but I've come to realize why people are baffled at the admin's movements. It's because they can't admit that the Trump team is smarter than them. That includes our guys. That is a very, very good point. Many of our guys don't want to acknowledge the fact that the administration, many of the people in the administration, are simply smarter than them. And it's fair. I can understand, it takes a little bit of adapting, a little bit of getting used to, because we've spent our entire lives being conditioned to see politicians, political appointees, presidential administrations as mostly full of gay midwits, because that's all they have been. But this administration is not. This administration is actually quite brilliant, and it's full of many brilliant, high character, high quality people who have planned this for a very long time. And I suspect that the more that we hit on this drumbeat, I don't know for sure. I haven't heard anything from them on this particular idea of beginning to invest in our people to build up the arts. The closest we've gotten is Trump has an executive order about beautifying DC. They have the garden of statues, and then we have the 250th anniversary plans. A lot of those are going to lean into this. There's going to be a lot of artistic opportunity here. But I think the more that we can keep up this steady drumbeat, demanding the patronage networks for our guys, but doing more than just demanding it, actually positioning ourselves to receive that funding, creating the institutions that can receive that funding, developing the demand for it. I think that this administration is one that would be responsive to that. You're going to get a lot of the typical, the kind of gay conservative, like, oh, the government shouldn't be involved in all this stuff. That, again, we aren't rid of libertarians yet. They're going to be stuck with us for a while longer. And to whatever extent they influence the conservatives in that disturbing gay marriage that they have. But I think there are enough insightful, forward-thinking, ideologically aligned people within the administration that if we begin building these things, if we begin building the institutions to promote the arts, to propagandize the American people, I think we may be able to start cooperating with them. So that's all I've got for you guys today. It was a good week. Many more to come. So thank you guys. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the channel memberships. Thank you for all of your support. I enjoy doing this on a day-to-day basis, and you guys make it easier. You guys allow me to do it with your generous donations. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for chatting. Thank you for hitting the like button. Thank you for following on Twitter, @RealKingPilled. Reminder, the Kingpilled Substack, kingpilled.substack.com is where you can go to get all of the links that I went through today. That pushes it out to the podcast platforms. And I'll say, for those of you who are listening on the podcast, the podcatchers, do me a favor. Leave me a 5-star rating and review. Tell me what you like or don't like about the show. And that also helps us grow the audience. And last but not least, go join the Discord, kingpill.com. Go sign up. Come join us. And there's also a Cash App link and a Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Many different ways that you can support. And thank all of you. Hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday. Last super chat in here. Hermetica Gemini, $5. He says, on propaganda, this is why they had to delete the Star Wars Extended Universe. It made the Empire a sympathetic Carlyle-esque society. Just imagine. Yes, just imagine. I played the AI Harry Potter thing at the very beginning. This AI stuff is getting really, really good. The creative potential that we can unlock with it is, I say what you want about like it being fake or, it's better to have the real thing. Yeah, well, our guys don't really have the capacity to create an entire film studio that can go film on location and get good actors and script writers and all that sort of thing. But we can do it on a shoestring using this sort of thing. And we can actually tell those stories. because that's how it has to be done. It can't be the rational argumentation. Ultimately, you need to create a story that shows the people what it would look like. Once you show it to them, then they'll naturally begin acting in alignment with them because it will resonate with that thing in their soul. All right, guys. Have a great weekend. I will see you back here on Monday. Until then, I give you Hulk. That's not Hulk. This is...
When they took a shot at my hero, and they tried to kill the next president of the United States, enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania